Number 1. Night hunting. I don't know why there seems to be so many scary stories that happen out in the country. I don't know if it is because there are less people around, or because it is quiet and there's less light. But even I have a story that is terrifying and took place out in the country. When I grew up, my parents had a really large piece of land. It was all hills and trees and just a beautiful countryside. Both of my parents were hunters too, and I always think it's funny to tell people about that. My dad died before she did, but even when the woman was in her 40s, 50s, and 60s, she would still take her gun out and go hunting. Growing up in a family like that, I was pretty much expected to learn how to hunt too. My dad would take me out at a very young age to teach me. At first I didn't like it, Little kids don't like killing animals. But I got used to it as I grew older. I was not only okay with it, it became something I enjoyed doing. My family never hunted just for sport though. We did it to put food on the table, and anything I killed, I was expected to bring it home for that reason. Because I wasn't the biggest guy, even when I was a teenager, that meant I didn't concentrate on big things like deer or anything. I was very, very fond of squirrel though. Anyway, I was going coon hunting one night when I was 15 years old. I realized the thought of eating coons might throw some people off nowadays, but coon hunting was a pretty big thing where I was raised. And when I went coon hunting, I generally started out in the early evening and then went into the night. And I always stayed on the land that my dad owned. I never strayed onto property that wasn't ours. I also always preferred to do all of my hunting alone. I never went with my parents or my brothers or anything. It was something that I just always felt better when I was doing it alone. I took my air rifle, which was a present I got when I was 13 years old, and I still own, and my favorite dog, Bruno. I went out to do some hunting. For those who don't know much about coon hunting, it mostly is a nighttime thing, although some people will try to do it during the day, but I think that always brings less success. Normally, you let your dog loose to trail and then to tree the raccoon. Once the raccoon is in the tree, you shoot it. I was always comfortable hunting at night. No one instilled in me a fear of the dark, monsters, the supernatural, or anything like that. My mind was solely on the business at hand. I wasn't in any hurry in the early evening to find anything, really, so I didn't just let Bruno loose and chase after him right away. I liked the strolling out in the woods with the dog. And Bruno was a great dog at this too. He would always follow right beside me as I was walking, but he was still kept on a strong leash because that was necessary for coonhounds. When he would be raring to go, he would definitely be hard to control. He followed commands really well, and in my opinion, was the best hunting dog that we ever had. The evening turned into night, as I expected it would, before anything happened. Fortunately, I had a flashlight when I needed it. Although I picked this night because the moon was full, big, and bright, and I saw great in the dark. I didn't need the flashlight often, and Bruno, of course, didn't need the light at all. He had that big old nose to let him know what he was looking for. I was trying to be aware of everything that was around me. I had been hunting enough to drown out the cricket and the frog sounds. Bruno was still not very active, so I was pretty sure there were no coons around at all. But that wasn't a huge surprise. They weren't exactly plentiful on our property. But after a while he started pulling on his leash. He wanted to go after something, I could tell. I hadn't seen anything, so I turned my flashlight on. I kept looking around, hoping to catch the distinctive flash of yellow in the coon's eyes, but I didn't see that. Even so, I was about to take his leash off and let him go, but something stopped me. I think that everything seemed pretty quiet to me for a moment. Don't get me wrong. There were still those sounds of the night that I was used to, but I wasn't really hearing them. With Bruno pulling, I supposed that there had to be coons out there somewhere, but I don't know. Something seemed off to me. Normally I would have released him right away, but I waited, and then I heard it. Something like I had never heard before. I had heard coons chittering and screaming and making all sorts of noises, but this sounded like many coons together screaming, and it wasn't the cute sounds that many people associate with them. They seemed very, very distressed about something. I could have just followed the sound of them and found them. However, I decided to release Bruno and let him go. It was much easier to just follow him, but this time I wasn't even thinking about treeing and shooting the coons. I wanted to know why they were making those noises. I ran and followed Bruno as he ran toward the sounds, or in his case, he could have been running towards the smell. I was shining the flashlight everywhere, trying to get some sight of what I was looking for, and finally I did. I got the flash of yellow, which let me know that I had spotted a treed coon, but still for some reason I didn't take my rifle to shoot the coon. I wanted to know why they seemed so distressed, and killing one of them in this situation just didn't feel right to me. As I got closer, I noticed something shocking. There was a guy, probably around the same age as me, on the ground. He looked like he was injured or something. Bruno was at the guy's side, and he was completely ignoring the multitude of coons who were distressed in the trees. The guy was pretty badly beaten up. He saw me, and immediately he started pleading me to help him. "He is gonna come back for me. My leg is hurt. Help, get me out of here." I tried to calm him down, but the guy was frantic. I couldn't get him to tell me what was going on. I figured he thought someone was trying to kill him. I found out later that when the attacker saw Bruno running toward him, he ran off into the woods. I figured the coons in the tree were screaming because they were distressed by the attack on the guy. When I asked him if I could try to help him stand, I noticed that he was bloody and had been stabbed in several places. Even though he was bleeding, though, I didn't think he was critically injured. As I was helping him to his feet, Bruno started barking. I didn't think anything of it at first. I mean, we were surrounded by treed coons. However, when I looked over in the direction that he ran in, my blood turned to ice in my veins. My flashlight shined on the scariest looking man that I'd ever seen. He was fat, had what looked like boils and scars all over his skin. His hair was long and unkempt, but the scariest part of him was the look in his eyes. I had never seen something more psychotic in my entire life. He looked like somebody who had just escaped from a institution for the criminally insane. And he had a hunting knife in his left hand. This time he didn't flinch as Bruno ran toward him. I guess he decided my coon dog wasn't something to be afraid of. Just the look of the guy caused me to freeze for a moment, terrified beyond belief. I had never seen a horror movie before. The closest I had ever come to that would be watching The Twilight Zone on television. This man looked like he belonged somewhere in the Twilight Zone. Fortunately, I was an experienced coon hunter and had instincts. I knew how to quickly use my rifle, and that was what I did. I dropped the flashlight to the ground and pulled up my rifle. The guy was even scarier looking in the dark, but at least I could still see him, and I still had the gun. I didn't hesitate. I didn't wait for this guy to do anything. He had a knife, and it was very obvious that he'd attacked this teenager. I shot at the guy. Now, I think I hit him, but I'm not completely sure. What I did know is that after the shot, he finally moved. But this included him running back into the forest, and then I didn't know where he was. I had good night vision, as I had mentioned before, but this was a different situation. I had a stabbed guy, screaming coons, and a barking dog to also deal with. Bruno did not chase the guy into the woods. I asked the guy on the ground if he could take the flashlight. He was strong enough to do so. He took it and he shined it in the different directions that I told him to, looking for the crazy man, but we didn't see anything. Don't get me wrong, not seeing anything was a relief. I didn't want to go after the guy. I didn't want Bruno to go after him either. All I wanted was to try and help this injured guy get to safety. I helped him up to his feet. Fortunately, his legs weren't hurt, so he was able to walk. He did sort of have to lean on me a little bit, but I needed him to watch with the flashlight in case the psycho came back, although I was sure that if he did, Bruno would let me know it before it happened. The coons had calmed down for the most part. I really didn't know what to think about their reaction. I mean, they may have just been distressed because they noticed two humans fighting in their vicinity, but I don't know. For some reason, I almost thought they were screaming to try and get help for the hurt guy. Or maybe they were trying to scare the crazy guy off, I don't know. What I do know is that they led Bruno and me to the scene and probably saved this kid's life. Getting home was hard and terrifying. I kept expecting that guy to come back. Fortunately, I didn't see him again. But the entire time, I felt that he was out there, watching. I could feel those crazy eyes on me. I was able to get the kid, who I later learned to be named Vance, back to my parents' house. They took him to the hospital, which was a pretty long drive. I later learned that Vance was night hunting as well, but not for coons. That's why he didn't have a dog with him. He was attacked out of nowhere by the crazy guy. He didn't know the guy. It was just a random attack. The guy came out of the blue and just began stabbing him. That's when the coons started screaming and Bruno came running to them. This happened back in the 1970s. About a month later, a dead body was found in the woods, stabbed to death. They never caught who did it, though, but in my mind, I knew who the killer was. As for me, I didn't hunt coons after that. There was something about my experience with them that changed it for me. I couldn't bring myself to shoot them anymore, even though I had many times before. I have an appreciation for them that I never had before. Vance healed up fine, and we ended up being friends for a while, until we drifted apart. But he never went hunting again. I understand why. Number 2. Country driving. When I was a teenager, I liked to go over to a friend's house and have some beers with him. My family really didn't care that I was drinking, but that's the way things really were back then. There wasn't really a lot of things to do out where we lived, so drinking beer and chewing tobacco were things a lot of us teen boys did. The only problem is that I didn't have a car. My friend Troy had a pickup truck, and he would pick me up and drive me down to his house. He would normally drive me home too, because that was just normal back then. Almost every guy I knew, when he was driving, would have a beer sitting between his legs. So on this night we were drinking beers and shooting the shit. Somewhere around 1 o'clock in the morning, Troy wanted to go driving out into the hills. He liked doing that late at night, and we decided to bring his younger brother Jess with us. We were 17 and Jess was 14, Troy had been letting Jess have some beer that night too, so we packed into the cab of the truck, with Jess in the middle. I loved driving through the hills at night, but I also knew that Troy could be a bit of a dick when he wanted to be, and especially when he was drinking. And there were tons of different roads out there, and many of them just led to other roads, and Troy was having such a good time that he ended up driving a long way from the area that we were used to being in. We eventually came upon this road that ended at a driveway. The driveway led to a really old and rural-looking shack. It absolutely looked like the kind of place that a hermit lived, because it was in the middle of no place. And it wouldn't have electricity or running water or anything like that. Troy was interested and wanted to check the house out. I wanted to also, but Jess was too scared to do that. He was worried that something bad would happen. I guess that he wasn't as drunk as Troy and I were. We didn't pull up to the house. Instead, we just walked up the driveway and approached the place. It was dark and we didn't see much light. We had a cheap flashlight in the truck though, and we were looking around. The light didn't have a strong beam though, so we couldn't see as well as we wished we could have. We began wondering if anyone was even living there. I mean, it was late, but there was nothing to indicate that there was any sign of life or anything. We explored the house and even went into the backyard. Suddenly we heard Jess screaming from the truck. We immediately stopped what we were doing. We ran around to the front yard of the shack and to the driveway. The headlights of the truck were still shining. That made it harder to see anything. All we could do was hear Jess yelling something that neither of us knew what it was. When we finally got to the truck, we saw Jess struggling with someone who had pulled him out of the truck. "Hey, get the hell away from my brother," Troy yelled when we saw the struggle going on. The person looked at us, but we still didn't have the best look at him. Troy had been carrying the flashlight, and he shined it directly into the eyes of the guy. Rather than getting a good look at him, though, he just put his arm up to block his face. I got to the guy first and grabbed him and tried to pull him off Jess. I was shocked when the man then bit me. I yelled in shock and pain because I hadn't expected that, and before I could do anything, he bit me again. Troy grabbed the guy, and we were both able to pull him off Jess, although Troy got bit too. The guy was strong, but he didn't try to get away from us. He just kept biting us, and he was biting really hard. All Troy and I could do was fight back and beat the guy, and finally we were able to trip him and push him down a small hill. This gave us time to get back in the truck as he rolled down the hill. But as we got into the truck, turned it around, I noticed him coming back. I told Troy to get the hell out of there, and he definitely did. The man chased us for a few moments, but of course he couldn't keep up with us. Jess later told us that he had opened the door of the truck to come after us. He didn't like being alone. The man came out of nowhere, grabbed him, and bit him. That is when he screamed because it was a deep bite and drew blood. The guy bit him several times as he was trying to pull him out of the car. We didn't know what to do. We just got the hell out of there. We didn't go to the hospital. We didn't know that human bites could be dangerous back then. We just treated them at home. And we never went driving on that road again. Number 3. Train track walk. I was bullied a lot when I was younger. When I got into middle school was when it was the worst. I came from a pretty poor family, so I didn't always have the best clothes. Many were hand-me-downs, and a lot of them were worn pretty severely. So the most of the bullying came from the kids who lived in town. However, the country kids joined in too, even though many of them were poor, just like I was. I had the detriment to being smaller than the other guys, so I was an easy target. I was also a very good student, so that completed the trifecta of bully victiming: poor, small, and smart. So even though I was smart, I hated going to school. At least when I was home, out in the country, I didn't have to deal with the bullies. I just had my siblings and we all got along pretty well. So being home was a lot nicer than being at school, which was full of testosterone-filled idiots who lived to pick on others. Summers were the best, although I don't particularly care for hot weather. I got to be away from the constant torment that I had to deal with. There were some kids who lived down in the holler, down the road from me, who were jerks to me as well. However, I rarely encountered them during the summer, even though I spent a lot of time out in the woods. One thing I really liked to do was to find this area where I could meet up with the train tracks. There was a really long track that ran straight through the country for miles and miles. It was quite a beautiful scene too, and I liked to imagine myself on the train, running through this beautiful country setting. Occasionally when a train would come by, I would sit up against a tree and watch it as it passed. I was out there one summer day, walking along the train track and minding my own business. After a while, I saw some people up in the distance. They were walking on the tracks too. I couldn't make out who they were, and didn't really pay attention to them until it was too late. It turned out to be 3 kids who really bullied me in school. They were Curtis, Tom, and Billy. And here I was in the middle of the hills with nowhere in sight to get away from them. When I knew who they were, I tried to just casually walk off. I was hoping they wouldn't know it was me. I failed though. They did, and they chased after me. I didn't get very far until they caught me. I was pretty scared they were going to beat me up, but they didn't do that at first. They just talked like jerks and insisted that I sit down and talk with them. And the whole situation was weird. They wanted me to sit with them and watch when a train comes. And I really didn't know why, but I was pretty glad they weren't going to beat me up. We waited, and I almost thought that the guys were going to be nice, but then we heard a train coming in the distance. And that is when everything that was happening changed drastically. The boys grabbed me and they began pulling me down to the tracks. I tried struggling against them, but it was no good. Even one of them would have been too strong for me to resist, much less all 3 of them together. When they pulled me down to the tracks, they revealed what they were planning to do. They were going to wait until the train was right there and push me onto the track so the train would kill me. I was terrified, and I believed them. I struggled and tried to get free, but I knew that I couldn't. I kept watching the train as it was getting closer and closer. The kids were mocking me, telling me that I was about to die, and I was crying. When the train finally got close, they made it as if to push me right in front of the train. However, when they pushed, they all kept a hold on me. The push was minor, and they really just pulled me back from the tracks and let me fall down. I lay on the ground crying. I think they probably thought they had done enough, because other than mocking me, they didn't try beating me up or anything. They just mocked me, laughed at me, and then they eventually left. The event was still scary for other reasons as well. I had no idea that they weren't going to hurt me, but also, they had no idea that their plan was going to work. If they had messed up and accidentally let go of me, I would have been killed by the train. I didn't tell anyone about the incident, and I guess they didn't either. They probably thought that they would get into trouble. I was just embarrassed, and I didn't want anyone to know. Hey y'all, Killer Orange Cat here. How are you doing tonight? It's Country Wednesday, and I hope you enjoy these stories. I am particularly fond of the first one, the coon hunting story. I don't hunt myself, but I found the story and what happened to be pretty frightening. For those who have wondered about my sister, she's doing okay. She's still got a week or so before she can go and see the doctor again and determine if she could put weight on the leg. And we'll keep you updated when that happens. I want to thank everybody for telling me the schedule thing's not really important, that you'll stick with me whenever I do post. I appreciate that. The schedule I really want to do for me, because I don't really have a lot of structure in my life. Hopefully I'll get it going, but we'll just play it by ear and see. I still have that abandoned buildings video, which I will probably put up on Friday. I might put up some shorts with 2-sentence horror stories, but I've never done a short before, so it's kind of weird for me to try. But I want to thank everybody for their support. Plus I might start up a membership thing. I've been hesitant to do that just because I don't really understand it that well. But as I mentioned in one of my community tab comments, one of the suggested perks is answering comments, but I do my best to do that anyway. I certainly would never make anyone pay for that. And of course the videos will always be free no matter what. So, all I have left to say is, don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed because you never know where a Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.